Well, hello neighbors. John, your whiskey neighbor here, and today, for our first review in a little while, I'm going to look at a classic bourbon. We're going to look at Booker's small batch from Jim Beam. Catch you after the break. All right, so just so you guys know, I've been a little under the weather, and I thought, well, maybe first time out of the gate, I should do something bold, and Booker's certainly is that. First of all, isn't it great that it comes in this wooden box? I think it's a great treat. I keep the box around just because it's a lot of fun. But Booker's is part of a small batch bourbon series that Jim Beam does. What's else in that series? Knob Creek, Baker's, Basil Hayden, and Booker's. I think it's just the four. Yeah. And if I got my history right, it's interesting. I've been doing a lot more reading about Scotch lately. But like I said, I wanted something quite bold coming back. And you can see, it's the first video that I'm outside of my deck. It is about 6 degrees today. That's, for my American viewers, about 42, 43 degrees. So it's not warm, but my deck's covered. It's actually not even real windows. But anyways, it creates a warmer experience. So I can be out here and shoot a video. Back to Booker's. As I understand it, Booker Noe, N-O-E, if that's how you say no, it was Jim Beam's grandson. And Booker would go to what is said to be the center of their warehouse and go through some casks, tasting, sampling, and would find bourbon that he really liked. And then he would bottle a few of those bottles and give it to friends and family. That's what I understand needs to happen. And then after that tradition maybe was occurring, I think they decided, well, why don't we, what a great box, hey? Like on the back here, I think that's supposed to be Booker himself on the rocking chair. Anyways, they decided, well, why don't we do some kind of honor to Booker and release in a similar way. So Booker's comes out whenever they're ready to release it. And it varies year by year, and the strength varies by the release because it is a cask strength bourbon. So what I have here is a Booker's from 2016. Now in 2016, they released 6 batches. And at first, when I got this, if I look at the label, it says batch 2016-01E. The 01 is the lemongrass release, and I thought that's what I had, but I think because it doesn't match the percentage when I went on their website to take a look, that because I have a 2016-01E, it's for export. Now, I don't know what that means because I couldn't find an exact match for 2016. The label does tell you a little bit more. So it says that this particular batch, and it changes because they release it when they feel it's ready, is 6 years, 1 month. It's always between about 6 and 9 years, I think is what I've heard. And this one is 63.85% or 127.7 proof. So again, the amount of age and the proof will change because it is a cask release. And I don't know if it's a selection committee now or who selects it. But it will vary because it is just how it comes out of the barrels. At any rate, this was a 2016 release, so it's a little older in the barrel, but this bourbon holds up quite well. Some of what I'm going to share with you is from my notes. As I said, I just coming back from a cold, and there's still probably a little bit of it kicking around in my nose. But this is a strong bourbon. At cask strength, it's unfiltered, uncut by any kind of water. It's just out of the cask and into the glass. I love the nose on this bourbon. Even when I had poured it out here, it's it's funny, I'd go inside, coming out with my camera, going inside, and I'd poured it, just left it. I'd come out, and I'm just in the room, and I could smell the wonderful caramels, but they're so edging on sweet into the vanilla that I almost get a candied cherry scent from it. But just like you're about to take a bite of a nice hard caramel apple, or maybe a candied apple, right? So that it's harder shell with cinnamon. Yeah, that's better. Harder shell. Yeah, so I can get some cinnamon in there. Definitely a candied feel. It feels kind of sweet just in the nose. You know, if you're going to pour bourbon, you pour this. It's just, you find yourself excited in anticipation. Booker's is really one of the first small batch, strong bourbons that I tried and kind of fell in love with that. You'll know if you're a fan of the channel, in 2017, last year, even just the single barrel of the Knob Creek, it turned out to be one of my favorite bourbons from the year. You know what's amazing to me is that, 127 proof, you'd also expect to be bowled over by the alcohol. And I mean, I can tell that it's present in the way that it's bringing a lot of those sugars and caramels into my nose. But honestly, just well done, well aged. Even though it's only 6 years, 1 month, obviously being bourbon, I don't know the mash bill on this. I should look it up. And I think it's, I used to know this, but in the spur of the moment, I don't want to misspeak. But it's, predominantly corn. And it would be aged in charred new American oak. I'm going to give it a sip. In the mouth and down the throat, this is when, you do sit up and recognize, oh, right, this is a very high proof bourbon, right? Definitely strong alcohol feel to it. But the flavors continue to be just excellent. Again, I almost catch a fruity note to the edge of the sweetness. It's got a toasted note to it. I should be trying to find a nut that maybe cashew, because it's pretty rich and oily. But just continues to have that strong caramel and vanilla. Definitely, as I swallow it and let it go down the throat, as I try to play around with it in my mouth, the higher proof does pick up. It does say, oh, hello, you're drinking a serious bourbon. So I guess in that way, it's not as certainly as easy drinking or as smooth or as refined. It's peppery on my tongue a little bit, but again, that feels more center tongue instead of edge tongue. So that to me is usually a sign of that stronger alcohol. But the wood is just wrapping it all together. Maybe that's where the nut was coming from, but the strong new oak flavor is just right there. I am going to add a little bit of water to it just because it can stand up to a little bit of water. So, really a teaspoon and a half, and it's still just fine. Should probably let it marry for a little bit longer. But, I should go back to my notes, because I think my cold is maybe getting in the way of some of this, because in the past, I really have commented about the various layers of flavor, and here I'm getting a little more the dominant caramel, dominant candy, a little bit of fruit, some nut. But in the past, I actually felt I was picking up some char you know, some of that toasted oak flavoring, and I'm not getting that today, but it could be that I really am just coming back from a cold. Yeah, so maybe the nose is a little fruity from that. Actually, not radically changed. Yeah. I expected a stronger change. Maybe the nuts, less cashew, maybe a little bit coconut. Yeah, I think a little bit of coconut today. What's nice is if you pour this later in the night, you can still catch all those flavors, right? If you've had a different bourbon up front or something that's a little more subtle, and then you pour a straight hit of Booker's, it's not a refined, it's certainly not a gentle bourbon. Yeah, I expected it to move one way or another, but even with all that water in there, I'm sticking with pretty much the flavors I started with, right? The fruit tends to be a deep red, like a cherry. I guess you could say an apple, but it doesn't. Okay, yeah, it could be an apple, but I like red cherry in this one because it tends towards, in my mind, except for when I think of the candied part, I think of that high gloss red cinnamony candied apple, that you're about to bite into. Sugars are great. They're really nice. But they are definitely toasted into that roasted sugars that you would want. Wow. I've always liked Booker's, and I've only had a few different years. This is the one that's been kicking around for me. It has oxidized a little bit. I thought it was fresher last time I had it, so I'm going to have to knock this down. Or look into gassing it to keep it where it is, because it's still quite nice. Anyways, this is Booker's 2016-01E at 127.7 proof or 63.85%. It's 6 years. In the palate, it is a little bit alcohol forward. It is a little bit kind of rougher than I remember. But the nose is gorgeous. Fills the room with those caramels and vanillas. A little bit of fruit edge to it, and when you drink it, I think it has all of what you just smelled and adds a little bit of toasted oak, which can come off a little bit like a nut. Maybe toasted coconut. That's a little too much. Somewhere between cashew and coconut, if you can imagine that kind of nut. Anyways, guys, it's good to be with you. I've been actually quite sick for the last few days, and that is never fun. So it's good to be out here. It's good to be out on the deck, and it's lovely to be sharing what I would be recommending to you if you like bourbon. Now, if you're just on the edge of trying bourbon, this is not a bourbon for you. This bourbon is for either an experienced drinker or someone who likes cask strength whiskey, even watered down. Then you still get all those good flavors, but it still feels a bit rough. So it's not as polished as some other bourbons. For me, because it hits everything that I like, the unfiltered, the high proof, the great story, the cool box. For me, Booker's is easily a 4.5 star bourbon on my 5-point scale. Could almost be a 5-point just because I love it so much. However, it's not a blanket recommend. Probably want to try it with a friend, or if you're positive that you like high proof bourbons, then absolutely. But it is definitely a little rougher than some other expressions, even some other high proof expressions. This one comes off a little bit healthy in the alcohol proof, but perfect, wonderful flavors. Anyways, I've talked too long. You guys, that's my thoughts on Booker's. I hope you guys, I'm going to come back and shoot my next video. There's a guy that used to be getting weird with the beard. I've forgotten his name right now because he's actually a YouTuber before me. and I've heard that he's got fell into some hard times, that his house actually burned down. In fact, since I'm talking this much, I'm going to put his name and maybe his PayPal account just up here in the side somewhere. And in case you want to just help him out, I think a couple of bucks, adds up with all the hundreds of people that seem to be watching some good whiskey videos. So thank you for your thoughts. Thanks for joining me on my patio, and you guys take care. Maybe find some nice bourbon and kick back and relax. See you later.